Welcome back to MOMnation Unscripted. Now, a word from our sponsor.
Hello, everyone. This is Ryan Gilliam, Senior Mortgage Banker with Waterstone Mortgage. If you're looking to buy a new home or even refinance a current one, I'm able to help you find the best program and interest rate that fits your specific needs. You could call me anytime directly at phone number 480-635-3035 if you have any mortgage questions or if you're ready to get pre-approved for a new home purchase. Thank you.
And we are live for another week, another show of MOMnation Unscripted. Today, unfortunately, my co-host Beth is unable to be with us today, but never fear. We have the absolutely lovely Cheri Romeo with us today. Hello, Cheri.
Hello, hello.
How are things going for you, girl?
Excellent. How about you?
All right. You guys all still homeschooling over there?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. High school, middle school, and chasing a toddler.
Hey, the fun stuff, right?
Exactly.
Never a dull moment over there, I'm sure.
No.
Well, it isn't dull here either, and I only have the one kid. So it did pretty well. Didn't do any death-defying antics on the boat this past weekend.
That's
So
good.
yay. Not much stress there. Work's still pretty busy. Got a lot going on. There's just an unbelievable amount of people moving to the Phoenix area. It's crazy, you guys. We're getting affected by fires a little bit, where I actually was just looking out the window just now thinking, oh, it's going to be a storm coming. And yeah, there's no storms on the radar. So I think we're getting the smoke and the ash and all of that stuff. So hopefully everybody is okay. You guys hanging in there?
Yeah, we've this morning we woke up with smoke in our house, and it was, at 3 a.m. It was pretty rough, but luckily we are safe where we're at. This weekend we've just had to be really careful about where we're going and where we're traveling.
Yeah. Same thing with you too, huh, Steph? You're pretty surrounded.
Oh yeah, Washington is on fire right now, and we're getting California smoke, and it's just and Oregon actually. Oregon has got some stuff going on too, so we're getting all the smoke. And we had a windstorm last night, so I went into Home Depot at like 6, walked out at like 6:15, and it was like a whole different city because it was so all the wind had blown the smoke in. I was like, oh my gosh.
Yes, it's been crazy stuff.
What are they attributing it to? Is it just been hotter this summer, or it seems like it's a lot crazier than it usually is?
So there was one fire by a gender reveal party. I don't know exactly how that caught. And then just people not being cautious, I think. It's not really about being hot up here. It's more about people not taking care of being mindful outside is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Right. We were on the boat this weekend for like a hot minute because I had a quick break. And so we went and threw a couple of lines in. This is like pretty late last night. And there were people shooting in the desert. And I'm just like, no, guys, no. Like, how irresponsible, first of all, shooting in the desert close to a lake when there's kids and there's boaters and there, you know what I mean? Like, come on. And then the fact that like all of that stuff back there, like Butcher Jones and all of that is all closed because we have been having problems. And lo and behold, somebody somehow got back there. I mean, whatever, Jeep could get you back there, right? And was shooting in the desert. And I'm just like, guys, come on.
Yeah. I mean, I get it. People are bored, but doesn't mean that you can be irresponsible and,
Yeah.
Well, the camping has been like, I think somebody just said that all the RV shops and stuff are pretty much sold out of RVs because everyone is camping. And so more camping, more people don't know, like, outdoor
they're
code
newbies
and things like that. They don't know what they're supposed to be doing. Oh, I can just let the fire go and I'm going to go ahead and go to bed. And they let that go. And all it takes is one little spark to spark the rest of the dry grass or whatever around them.
So true. I mean, everything is sold out. We can't get life preservers to save our life right now. I didn't even mean it like that. That was pretty funny. But we can't. And I mean, fishing gear, we're like having to, we like to go to Bass Pro Shop, and it's fun to kind of shop for fishing gear. And, I don't know, I think it's fun. But now we're having to go on Amazon, and even still, it's few and far between to find what you need.
Yep.
Yeah. Same thing here.
I'm glad everybody's getting out and doing outdoorsy things, though. I mean, that's
Oh
good.
yeah. It's important, I think, for your mental health, because just sitting at home is just terrible. And we've been social distancing with a couple. We have 3 families, and all 3 of us kind of social distance together, and that way we can have interaction. I have enough kids that are like at the same age group, so that we're not dealing with the mental health part along with the education part that we're going to start talking about in a few minutes. But it's just like that mental health is so important that it's not being addressed on a grander scheme of things.
I love that.
Totally. I'm 100% on board with that. And let's just dive right into it. That was a really good segue, Steph. So Steph, tell us a little bit about you, what we're going to talk about today, and kind of what brought you to this point.
Yeah, so I have 2 boys. They're 17 months apart, and they're currently age 14 and age 13. And my 13-year-old woke up from 12 to 13, and I swear, I was like, I don't know if I like this kid. But before that, there was a lot of things going on. I'm dyslexic, and I was diagnosed in the 80s. And the current level of work that's being done in the schools is less than what they did in the 80s. And I remember when he was in kindergarten I just started crying because I saw myself struggling. I might cry in this, by the way.
I got tissues. Well, yeah. That won't help you.
Yeah, but I saw myself struggling in him. And it just broke my heart, because it's just like, I didn't want to have a kid with dyslexia. And so he was like my main focus for a while. And he ended up in 5th grade reading below kindergarten level. In the meantime, he's been diagnosed with ADHD, and he's on the autism spectrum. So, we're dealing with those things as well. And half the time you're like, is this autism? Is this ADHD? Or is this dyslexia? Which one is this? And you have to really kind of figure it out. And a lot of them kind of go together. And so dyslexia is not, in our country, is really not focused on like it's supposed to. And that was where we started. So when I say he was in 5th grade reading below kindergarten level, I mean, he recognized about 13 letters, and 5 of them were from his own name, and didn't know the sounds of all the rest of them, couldn't put letters together. And it was really difficult for me. I was crying all the time. The thing is, it took me a little bit to figure out that my other son also was slightly dyslexic, but he also has an IQ of 147. So I always make this comment that brilliant kids typically have some sort of learning disability, because they're so smart, and there's that gap between the 2 things that we can't figure out which one we need to work on. And so there's a lot of problems in that area. But it started out with me telling the school, hey, I need help, I need help, I need help. And no one really doing anything. And there's like, oh, this program will work, this program will work. And they don't have evidence. So you have to ask those questions. And so I'm going to start out with, first, you really have to ask the question if you have a question. And if your school district isn't answering it, find an advocate. So that's the first thing I want you guys to all remember, is that it's important to find people around you that are dealing with the same kind of thing. And there's all these memes about how you, as a special education parent of a special education student, you usually get help from another parent. So ask the question. Start a Facebook group in your local area. Those things are really important, because you really get a lot of information from people. So we ended up in 5th grade, and my son was not reading, and I'm literally saying, okay, well, my son, I didn't know what words to use exactly. So I, as a dyslexic person, read the entire law, and it took me forever, and realized my son is not getting a free and appropriate education. Those words are very key: free and appropriate education. As soon as you put those words out there, school districts start going, oh my gosh, she knows something about the law. We need to work different. And we can't, as we shouldn't have to do it that way, but we have to use those words. We have to use legal terms and say, you're not providing this. And then you have steps you have to go through to make sure that you're getting what you need. For instance, with my son, I had to ask the questions, in the order that was required for them to make any steps. So for him, I had to say, okay, so the education evaluation that you did in-house, which is the first thing you have to ask for. When you feel like your child is failing or not doing what they're supposed to do, you have to ask for an education evaluation. And you have to put it in writing and expect that you have to, the law is clear about 35 days. They have to get it done within 35 days, or at least answer you with what they're doing within 35 days. That might be changing because of COVID right now, but just keep that in mind. So those, but asking that question, it has to be in writing, and you send it to his regular education teacher, his or her, and also the principal. If you know who the special education teacher is, you include them, and they need to respond, and they say, I would like a response by, and you give them like 3 to 5 days, and they should respond to you. And if they don't respond to you, say, I haven't read this response, I'm going to go ahead and move this to the district level. And so at that point, then you get a little bit more attention. So once you get the education evaluation done, then you have a meeting with everybody, and they say, okay, this is what we're going to do. They always give you a plan of what they're going to do. And once that plan starts, they do things like, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. We're going to, like, for instance, for my son, they're like, we're going to use this program, I think it's called corrective reading. It's very effective. It's been proven. I'm like, well, who did the research? Usually the research is done by the people that made the program. So guess what? Of course it works. So you need to make sure that the research is done properly, and you need to ask for the evidence. And then give them a timeline. Okay, great. So go ahead and use this corrective reading. You have 6 months. So we waited until Christmas, and this is in the 5th grade. So we got 6 months to see progress. Christmas break. So the break is a big part of it. You have 2 weeks off, and then you need to see where he is when he comes back. How much did he backslide? So this kid backslid almost to the very beginning. That 6 months went down to like 2 months. And so we had to, so that was evidence that this program is not actually working for him. So that was when, at that point, and then I'm fast tracking through this so you guys kind of know, but you have to ask that, and then they may say, well, we're going to use this program. Well, again, let me see the evidence. And then the other part is you have to ask, let me see weekly progress reports. I want weekly progress reports, and I want to see weekly work samples. And make it easy for them. Say, I will pick them up, so you don't have to worry about putting them in his backpack. I will come pick them up. I will come take care of it. You just have them at the front office for me, and I'll pick them up. That way they don't have to go like, well, I didn't have time to send it to you, or I didn't have this. Just make it super easy for them. They don't have to worry about doing anything except for just dropping it at the front office. So once you've done that and you haven't seen progress, you call an IEP meeting, and you give them dates, and always in writing. Everything is in writing. Always CC the teacher that is his general education teacher, the principal, and their education, depending on which school district you're at, is either inclusive education or special education. So CC that person. All those people need to be put in the list. Like I like to call an IEP meeting. I don't agree with what progress has happened, and so for my son, it was like, there's no progress. We need to move forward with a different option. And so once you've done that step, you're going to look at it from a different approach, because now you're not going to agree with what they're talking about. So then you're going to ask them, well, I don't believe that the education evaluation you guys did in school is actually going to give the right information. I think we need to do an independent education evaluation, IEE. An independent education evaluation is usually a neuropsychiatrist. There's other people that will do it, but I recommend always trying to use a neuropsychiatrist. You get to choose who. Do your research. Make sure you do your research. Ask for their suggestions, because they may have other people they've worked with and are really good. You don't know that. So just ask for their suggestions, but also be ready to do your research to find out who they are and see if they're going to be effective for what you need. So once you get the education evaluation, independent education evaluation, then you can move forward with what they say. So for instance, my son he is severely dyslexic. He has also got dyscalculia and dysgraphia. And of course, we're on the spectrum and we have ADHD. At that point, once you've got the IEE, you have fuel for the fire. So they have to do I shouldn't say they have to. They're going to try to fight it. And this is when you say to them, okay, well, his free and appropriate education is compromised. You let me know when you're going to provide the education he needs, and then you move forward from that standpoint. Sometimes that looks like a lot of emails back and forth. Sometimes that looks like just a phone call. And sometimes it actually requires you to file due process. And due process is a whole other conversation that requires, it does not require an attorney, but they're going to try and scare you away from an attorney. Or it's scare you saying that you have to have an attorney, not away from an attorney, but you have to have an attorney so that you don't have to, so that you won't do it, because their attorney will be involved, but not in the way that you think. They won't be in the room necessarily, but due process usually is handled all through mediation. And right now with COVID, it's all just online. But you'll have to file due process. And that process could be very simple. I have not had to file due process. And I'd rather not file due process, because what happens when you have due process, you have an end date. So for instance, like if I would have said for my son, ended up going to Linda Mood Bell, I would have had to have an end date instead of, we want to see his progress and then we'll evaluate afterwards. And so you want to try not to do due process, but if you need to do due process, do it. And anyway, so at that point, if you don't have to file due process and you keep moving forward, you could do things such as outside support. So we actually ended up going to Linda Mood Bell, which is very heavily focused on dyslexia and learning disabilities. And they were very effective. In 18 months, it's very expensive. So the school district paid for it. And so in 18 months, he went from reading below kindergarten level to decoding words at 7th grade and still reading lower, like a 3rd grade level. So it was very effective. Summer came along and he's still decoding words at 7th grade, but he backslid, but not as much as before. And so they were it's one of those programs that's very effective. Again, you have to do your research. There's about 5 programs that work really well for dyslexia. I know a lot about dyslexia, but also there's behavioral things that can come up. If you have a behavioral problem with a child, they're going to ask for a BIP, which is a behavior intervention plan. They'll ask for evaluations done within the school district, but they also do evaluations within like neuropsychiatrists as well. And there's different programs. And in Seattle, I can give you names. If you're in the Seattle area, I can give you all kinds of names of both people that do BIP intervention or evaluations as well as IEEs. So all of that being said, even today was our first day of school. After getting all of the things that we needed to get done, and we got everything on the line. He's supposed to be going to the school and getting everything that he needs. This is outside placement. We got outside placement to a school that has one-on-one education, and he gets all the training that he needs. He has teachers that are supposed to have training sorry, my brain went slow. Training in dyslexia, and the dyslexia, and they didn't set them up properly. So even when you think everything is set up, you still have to fight. So remember that no matter what, you still have to fight. But the biggest thing is you need to know that there's advocates all around you. Each state has an ombudsman, and each state can provide you with, and it's something the state provides, and there's ombudsman. They can tell you kind of which direction to go, and you want to make sure you call an ombudsman and ask for support. You also want to make sure that you talk to OSP, or in Washington it's OSPI. I'm not sure what it's called in Arizona and other states, but it's the superintendent, basically whoever's over the school districts in general over in the state. Have a conversation with them. Be familiar with their layout. Who's in charge of what? Here in Washington's, there's people, we have the OSPI there, and there's plenty of people there that I've talked to. And when I call in, they're like, "Oh, hi, Stephanie." So it is definitely something you want to be familiar with them, and remember, be nice to them because they are just following the law. Even when you're at your worst, you got to remember these teachers. 99% of the time, the teacher is supporting you. It's they have to go through the district to get what they want, but the steps are each district has a little bit different what they expect. Now, keep in mind, when like for instance, my son, they spent almost, I think it was like $400,000 last I checked, which is a lot of money. One student, they could have had a whole department with dyslexia. But keep in mind that the first $30,000 comes from the district, but the district was given for special education so much money, and I don't know the exact number. I think it was like 20-something thousand. So they had because they had to pay for some of it. And then the rest of it goes, this is in Washington. The first $30,000 is the district, and they call it safety net, and it goes into where the state pays for it. And unfortunately, it's a lot of money when you don't take care of it the right way the first time. And so, meaning that if they started recognizing this stuff going into kindergarten, and we were like 1st grade, hey, we need some help, this is what's going on, it wouldn't have cost so much. But this money is already allocated to your child. The $30,000 is already allocated to your child because it costs, I think Washington figured out the other day for our district in Kent, it's $17,000 per kid that they've allocated right now. So that is per kid, not for special education. Special education is more, that's where like closer to the 30,000. So special education has a little bit more money allocated to them. So if a kid is enrolled in special education, the state gives them more money. So keep that in mind. So don't think that you're taking away from any other students. Your student is just as important as any other student. But the key words are free and appropriate education. You need to get a group of women, and I say women, there might be some dads, but a group of women that know or have gone this path, because it really is a team effort. It is not just one person doing it on her own. I have done it almost all on my own because I didn't know the group of people. And I'll tell you, since I started being part of a group of people, I've had so much more support and I've gotten so much further. And I've volunteered for foster kids, for IEP meetings, and for anybody that's called me almost to go into IEP meetings. And I've seen so much bad in the districts that I am so appalled by how our education system is. And it's all over our country. We're all fighting for the same thing, and you can't stop fighting. I thought I was good today when we started school for the first day, and I literally cried for half the day today, worried about my child, because it really is like we have these kids we're responsible for and what we need to move forward with. So those are some of the key points that I like to say. Also, this is not easy. You will drink wine. You may do, and it may be in the middle of the day. You have to ask for support. Always ask people that know or have been through it. And if they don't know, I'll do research. Call me up anytime. I have seen kids that I've helped. There's one kid I help a lot who he was born with fetal alcohol. It was a fetal alcohol baby, and he has dyspraxia, and he's autistic, and he's got an IQ of 61. That kid is the sweetest kid. So I do it for the kids. I love helping the kids out. There's not a kid, I haven't turned very many people away. I've only turned one parent away because she just refused to. You have to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. So when a parent starts intervening and saying, "Oh, well, they can't do that, or they can't do this," and there is a part where the parent does have some responsibility in making sure their kid gets to school on time, takes care of the medical stuff. So I always say, people always say they don't want to give their kids medication for ADHD. It's quality of life for your kid. I'm not telling you have to do it, but there's other options, of course. But test them and make sure it's actually effective. And ask the teachers, like, hey, I started doing this new medication. Can you tell me what's going on? I'm trying to think what else I could tell you. You guys have any questions you can think of?
Cheri does. I do too, but we'll let Cheri go first.
So first, thank you.
You're welcome.
I was tearing up when you were talking about some things. Sorry.
That's okay.
So when I was going through the process of becoming a single mom, that is when I found out a lot more about my oldest daughter. She already had worked with speech pathology, and that had been going a lot better once our environment changed. But she also had ADHD, ODD, and some other things that were hindering her. So luckily at that point in time, we're at a really good school district, and the intervention team was amazing, so helpful. It was a really small charter school. But now my oldest is in high school. We're military, so we move a lot. We're in a new place, new district. And then obviously virtual, it's a lot harder. And so just some of the things that you were saying, like I've gone through the process before, so I can relate to what you're saying, but also every school district is totally different. Some people are really willing to help, some aren't, or there's pushback. So I think the biggest thing, and I took notes during your little thing, because I honestly, I have to basically go through the entire process again. And I just really appreciate that you opened up about this. I know it's not easy, and I know you got to fight that fight and keep advocating. So I just wanted to thank you. And I think I will be messaging you a couple questions, if that's okay.
Absolutely. And I want to make sure you guys all know too, special education isn't just for kids that have learning disabilities. It's also for kids that have mental health issues. And this is a hard one. I'm going to cry. My older son tried to commit suicide almost a year and a half ago now, based on his anxiety for school. And the school district fought me. And I was like, we are in the effing hospital because of you. This is what you're going to have to do. And I told them what they have to do because it is a lawsuit. I'm not filing a lawsuit because I don't have that kind of energy, but it could be. But the thing is that anxiety is huge in teenagers. Depression is huge in teenagers, and high school is hell. I mean, what you're going through right now is going to be, it's going to be hard for you as much as it is hard for her. And so online school is really hard for all students. What state are you in?
California.
California. Okay. So online school is hard for all students. So we're going to have to ask for special education students, especially compensatory services. I can't say that word right. I can't say it. But you'll have to ask for additional services for your child. So if she's getting social emotional support at school, or she's getting any sort of other support at school and it's not being handled right now, you need to put in writing as soon as possible that you need those services. And you want to put that in writing. Any parent that has a need during this time, during COVID, that there is a need for special education, additional support outside of the online learning. And those, again, all in writing, everything needs to be put down on paper and timeline. And so I wish I would have brought my binder to show you guys. I have a month in there for every month of the year, a little folder, and I start one every year. I have a little folder, so any kind of conversation I have, I print it out. I know it's wasting paper, but whatever. I print it out and I put it in the binder so that I can say, I have everything right here. If I have to go to court today, I'm ready. I also have an email address set up to where it's just for I have one for my older son and one for my younger son. So all work for school goes to that email for my older son, and all work goes for my younger sons. Each one of them has their own email set up so that when I go to look for it, I'm not burying through Kohl's ads or whatever. I'm looking at just the stuff for my older son's school and education needs, and I can find it a little quicker. And you can do a search bar, but if everything's in there, so if they ever want to see all your emails, it's all there. It's easy to get to, easy to find. I know it's managing another email account, but it just makes it so much easier. And then what I do at the end of every year, I have folders on the side, and I put everything in those folders. And I have, English, math, IEP, all the things that get emailed to me, meeting notes, things like that. And I have a year for each one, and I go to 2018, you can see them all. 2019, you can see it all. And the reason why I do that is just because I can look through that quicker. And sometimes I want to read everything about, like just English. I just want to read about English. And it's so much easier to look at the English stuff in that folder than it is any other way. So
that's brilliant.
Yeah, I love that idea about preparing as you go, just in case you're going to need it down the road. I mean, you might think about that. Like, think about having a job, having a household, being a parent of other children, and having to deal with this, and then collecting all of that information if you're like, hey, this is getting a little bit more serious, and we need to do something here. So that is genius.
Yeah. Well, especially if you have it printed out, you bring that folder in with you to the meeting. It's when you're sitting at the desk, you're like, oh, let me pull up the email you sent. Nope, I got it right here. Hold on. Here's the email you sent. This is what you said. This is what I said. You have it right there. You can just hand it over to them, and they're not going, well, I can't see the email, but having it right available for them is really helpful. And, I've had some really great teachers, and I've also had some teachers that I want to just say, why are you teaching? And I have actually said to them, why are you still teaching? I've said those words because it is ridiculous to me how many times I've gone into a meeting. I just helped a foster kid before this COVID happened. 10th grader, a big boy. He hugged me at the end and was in tears saying thank you. Somebody saw me. He wasn't seen because he was a foster kid. And I'm just like, oh my goodness. Yeah. So those kids are not being seen. I mean, special education. And you know what? The sad part is the majority of the people I'm helping that don't get the support are minorities.
Well, and I would 100% if you don't have an education, that makes it so much harder. And even as a parent, if you're not educated on certain things, or if you don't know how to find the resources, you read the law, right? Not everybody's going to do that or knows where to find it. So, right. And I 100% have said this for numerous things, but if you lack that education piece on the back end and understanding the process, you're not going to get anywhere. You're going to get steamrolled or just not know when to push and to advocate. And so I think, again, this is amazing what you're sharing. And I think that that's going to be very helpful for a lot of people to know what resources are out there. I think there's such a huge disconnect that parents don't know what is available to them or what their children should be receiving.
If you have a question about what is available to your children, go to the district office, go to the inclusive ed or special education department and say, I need to get the current laws. There's a packet. And I think right now, I don't know if in Washington, it's yellow. So it might be yellow in your state, but each state is a little bit different what color it is. It's a little booklet and it's very clear on the law because they're supposed to give that to you. And that is one thing you need to make sure you get every single meeting it is offered to you. It's like, when you go to, and they give you those HIPAA rules, it's the same thing for special education. You need to make sure you get that book and read it. And that's where I started and ask what is available in the district. And I mean, like I said, both my sons are in outside placement right now because of mental health for my older son and also his dyslexia and high IQ. And then my younger son because of his dyslexia and everything else that goes along with him. He is such a smart kid, but he's just so far behind because he was placed far behind, So there's a lot that goes with it, but just asking the question, what's available to me, and then ask the question, do you guys do outside placement here? Where do you do outside placement? And they may ask you, why do you want to know that? I'm just curious where the outside placements are located. And then research those outside placements. And that outside placement could look like a school for kids on the spectrum. There is plenty of those schools that are out there. But for everything that's good in this world, please do your research. There are some of them that do not know what they're doing. So and it's really about reading, asking questions, and making sure there's no complaints through the state on that school as well. Because if you look at this complaint, I mean, if you see things like alleged child abuse, don't put your kid in that school. So make sure that is something that's happened here recently in Washington. And then yeah, I see your look. It's really ridiculous. This was a school that I'm not going to mention the name right now because it's they're illegal right now. But there was a kid that was abused, and I know the kid, I know the mom very well, and it was physical abuse. And yes,
by the teachers.
Yes.
Oh,
there are some teachers that should not even be walking in on this near kids at all. Yes. So the conversation is really real because they're not as regulated as far as when people have a problem, they usually leave because they're paying, right? So they're paying for it, you leave, you just said, forget it, I'm not going back. And as a parent with a special education child, I don't have the time to complain. Mm-hmm. And I told them, this is just really real. This is a real thing. If I don't have the energy to complain, I don't want to be the person causing the problem is what the attitude some parents have, because we are always causing problems because we have to, because things aren't right. So they don't make those phone calls and they don't file. This lady, I said, you have to, because yours is not the only kid that's getting hurt. And she goes, I know. And so she did. But if you think about it, how many kids before got hurt and parents just left? There's, so it's really a thing. So you just make sure you have those conversations. And I speak at board meetings, a school board meeting, all the time. Actually tonight I wrote a complaint because they're doing some things that are not right, and you need to just follow your school board. You need to listen to what's happening. You listen to your district, and if they're doing something you don't agree with, right now it's all because it's all on Zoom, everything's just written in. You have to write in, and then they read your statement online. But it's just do it so that you can be part of the solution. It's really important.
Yeah, that's huge. Staying involved and, actually doing research yourself is really, really important. I agree. And for a lot of things, not just this. So I may have missed in your story, and I apologize if I did, but when did you get your son diagnosed? And do kids have to be diagnosed before you move forward into IEPs and IEEs and all of this kind of stuff?
Yes, that's a good question. I did not say that, and that is something. So there is a part of, so for my son, not being diagnosed with dyslexia and being identified with dyslexia are completely different things. So different states right now are really pushing the dyslexia laws of identifying students at younger ages. Identifying is not diagnosing. So now this is for dyslexia. The reality is, if we taught all kids like that's effective for dyslexic kids, all kids would read better. But that's a whole nother conversation. But they do have to be diagnosed to get as much support as I'm getting. Being identified doesn't mean they're going to get support. In Washington State, it is the law that they're identified and that the districts have some sort of plans in place. this in different states, it's different things. Like I know in Texas, they've been doing a lot more than we have in Washington for years. I think I want to say it's New York has done a lot of things as well, but it's just more based on what your local state is requiring. And so you have to be, so my son was not diagnosed until he was in 5th grade when we finally got the IEE. And although all the evidence, I mean, all the teachers were like, I'm pretty sure he's dyslexic. They didn't teach him like a dyslexic child, even though they had the information, even though they knew he was, just by his actions. They didn't teach him because he didn't have the diagnosis. Now his IEP is based off his autism, not off his dyslexia. And autism, and to get an IEP on autism, you have to have a diagnosis. And let's talk about the difference between 504 and IEP. Okay, so 504, if you have autism or ADHD or anxiety, you could likely have just a 504 plan. And the 504 plan is basically providing accommodations, but not requiring goals. So basically, for instance, accommodations would be having notes pre-written out for the student, or allowing them to sit in the front of the classroom because they get distracted, or if they have an anxiety moment, they can, because they don't let you put hoodies up in school, so you can put your hoodie up so you can turtle or whatever. So having those kind of accommodations are in a 504. A 504 does not require goals. So you are not going to have a 504 and an IEP. You're going to have one or the other. When you go to college, it'll be a 504, but don't worry about that until you're in late high school before you even worry about changing your IEP to the accommodations. Don't worry about that. So IEP is the accommodations along with goals. So for instance, like for my son's goal right now for math is that he can memorize. So he's doing long division now, but let's say 2 years ago, it was able to read a story problem and figure out what the problem was, what it was supposed to be, like subtraction, addition, division, multiplication, right? And be able to solve it. And it was like 40% accuracy was what their goal was for the middle of, or the end of the year, because it was 0% accurate in the beginning. And then it's like, in the next year, it was like 100% accuracy. So it could be, that's what goals could look like, but also the paragraph. So writing a paragraph with 4 sentences or 5 sentences, whatever the requirement is, and on the same topic, with using punctuation and things like that. So it could be very simple like that, or it could be like my older son. His is come into classroom and not be disruptive and participate in class and not sleep on the desk. And there's all kinds of things that it could be. So it's just the goals are based on the need of the child. So each child is different. And one of the goals I always try to make sure that the students have is advocate for yourself, learning to advocate for yourself 100% of the time. And the reason why I put that in there is because for the rest of their life, they will need to learn how to advocate. I was not taught how to advocate. And as a human, I still don't advocate for myself. I do for other people all the time, but you know how moms are. So, but it definitely is for IEPs. To get an IEP, it doesn't always have to be that you have a diagnosis for when it comes to a deficit in reading or in writing or in math. You can get an IEP based on your education needs, but typically you're about 3 grades behind. And so you want to try and get an IEP before that, because when you're 3 grades behind, it is hard to catch up. It's a lot of hard work. So you want to try and get a diagnosis. Getting a diagnosis is so much better because then you have idea of what it is that they need and the support they need. So.
Awesome. I appreciate that. Cheri, was that similar for you when you were dealing with your oldest?
Yeah. So, well, we had a diagnosis before they started working on the process, but it helped 100% because I know that the accommodations and just those goals were based off of what we were working on with our with the medical healthcare side, if that makes sense. So I was learning a lot through behavioral health goals and coping mechanisms on how to help her with things. So I was able to then go back to the school and say, okay, listen, this is what we're working on at home and with her provider. And I'd like to see that replicated in the classroom or, with her teachers. And so that definitely helped in the beginning, and they were super open to it. And so I think that things have just, and one thing I did want to say, Steph, I was that parent that was totally against medication, right? In the beginning, I was that parent, and I was like, it's not going to happen in the beginning. Yeah. And I was really strongly about that. I felt really strongly about that, and I continued to do research. And luckily, I just had a provider that was like, "Listen, I'm willing to do what you want to do in the beginning, but I want you to know these are the options, and we'll do behavioral modification. We'll do all of that." And we did it. But at the end of the day, I think that there's a lot of judgment, a lot of shame out there, and so a lot of people are scared to tiptoe into those waters. But what you said is quality of life for your child. And so when we did transition, it took a little bit. Medication like that isn't like a one size fits all. You got to figure out which milligram works best or what medication in general. There's a lot out there. And once we found the medication that was perfect for her, it was life-changing for her, right? So not just for me, right? The home was a little bit less stressful when she found that perfect medication for everybody. But for her, she was struggling less, she was crying less, she was anxious less. And so keep that in mind. I mean, our own beliefs or what we think about medication doesn't always mean it's the best for our child. And I think it's really important to kind of listen to them, see what they're struggling with, and try it. I mean, you can always go off of it if it's not helpful to your child. But when you see that drastic difference where they're able to focus, they're able to retain math or whatever their struggle is, that's crazy. And that moment is something that I'll always remember.
Exactly. Well, and the thing is like there's a lot of things out there that we could all take. I mean, there's stimulants, non-stimulants, so on and so forth. And when you have medication that supports your kid, you notice almost immediately, like, holy crap, my kid is doing great. And you see that it's a whole different lifestyle for them, and you see them enjoying life. And I'm going to tell you, I literally cried the first time that we had anybody, like when I saw him acting a way that was just great, so it's really, I mean, people say that the whole thing is, this goes back to mom shaming medication. We as a society freaking put moms down all the time. We have to stop doing that. We have to lift each other up, because this is hard. It is so hard. And the thing is, my mom would never go to a mental health therapist. And we are not our parents. We are, at a certain age now, we need to realize we are not in that same set. We would go get a mental health. We'd send our kids to mental health if they needed it. I would never deny my child mental health help. Why would I? Or even like, let's say my child was having a problem processing food. Why would I deny them the medication that's going to help them to process the food properly? As much as like you're not processing your brain waves and what your brain is doing properly, why would you deny them the help for that? It's the same thing. So.
And is that common, what Cheri experienced with having her medical team and help her, coordinate, hey, here's how we're going to support her at home? Is it common for the school to be on board with that? Or is that also another fight?
So here's what I would recommend. If you are having a fight with your school district, look for if you have a medical team that's helping you. So if you have a psychiatrist or psychologist or a therapist, ask them if they have a program, kind of like a wraparound program is what they call it here in Washington. It's like where they basically take the school district, the psychiatrist, the therapist, and an interventionist, or whoever you have on your team, and get them in the same room together and have a conversation, like, what is best for little so-and-so, and they will sit in the room. And that is, if you're having complications with the school, once they see those people face to face and they say, okay, well, the medical professional and a professional is saying this is what this child needs, they are a little bit more willing to do it. But sometimes it takes having a wraparound team. And so I'm not 100% sure how the wraparound team works for private pay, but I'm a single parent and I'm low income. So it was considered part of my insurance. My insurance covered it because I'm the way we did it. But there's private pay insurance. It doesn't always cover it, which is a whole nother conversation again. So it's based off mental health, but you can get letters from your doctors. The provider that you're working with, like she was talking about, she had an interventionist that were working with her. You talk to the people that are doing PBA therapy or whatever therapies you're doing. They can write letters and say, this is what I'm recommending for this child, and this will be the best support for this child to be effective in the classroom. And so those are things you can do. It's never as simple as like, hey, we're doing this at school, or we're doing this at home, we're doing this at the doctor's recommending this. It's more of a, well, why do we need to do it? It's always, there's usually a pushback. So
Gotcha. I know that you help out a lot of families, which bless your heart. Thank you so much for doing that and volunteering as well. I mean, that is just amazing. So thank you. But what are the common questions that you get from families? Like, what are moms' biggest obstacles? What are their biggest things that they come to you with?
Usually it's accommodations. How can I get these accommodations? And that's the easiest one. That's the easiest question, but that's a question I get a lot. How do I get these accommodations? When they ask for certain accommodations, I ask them why they need them. And here's why. Because sometimes there's accommodations that enable them to grow, and you want to make sure that you don't enable their growth. And so you want to make sure that sometimes accommodations, they don't remove old accommodations from the IEP that should have been removed. So every year you go through those accommodations and make sure that you read the IEP and you make sure that you got the right accommodations. For instance, we had one where the kid was supposed to get tracing paper every time he wrote, or not tracing, but the one with the lines, every time he wrote anything. And he's going into 8th grade this year. He does not need that anymore, and they're still giving it to him. And it's like, those are not helpful. So you have to ask for those accommodations. That's the biggest question I get. But these are moms that already have IEPs. So the moms that call me crying and upset, the ones that need the most support, are the ones who have never had an IEP. They don't know where to go or where to start. It's how do I start is the biggest, scariest question. And also the other question, there's another one that's really big. Why do I have to, or should I be the one paying for his therapy? So therapy meaning, does he have an occupational therapist, or does he have a speech pathologist, or does he have a social emotional coach, whatever it is that is in the school district? No, those are all should be through the district. The district has the funding to do that. They have the money to do that. That's why they got that X amount of dollars for your students, so they can have those supports available. So if you want to do it in addition to, that's up to you. But if it's coming to you through the school district, it should be effective. Make sure it's effective, obviously. And make sure you communicate with the occupational therapist. What exactly is happening in this group? What are you doing? How are you helping my student? And, it's a big conversation. But how do I start is the biggest one. First thing you start with is an email to the principal and the teacher saying, my student is falling behind. I would like to request an education evaluation. And that is the first thing you start with. And then if you notice that your student's still not getting help, then you're going to say, my student's not getting a free and appropriate education according to their needs. How are we going to change that? And it's, again, emailing principal, general ed teacher, and if at that point he has a special education teacher, that one as well. And just thought of something else. Oh, the other question I get asked a lot is, do I have to come to this IEP meetings? Yes, every single one. Every single one. They will hold the IEP meeting without you, and they will make their own decision. And take notes and make sure that, and you repeat it. During the IEP, so you should request, and this is what I tell every parent, request a copy of the IEP 3 days prior to the IEP meeting at minimum. So I'd like it a week to 3 days before. And the reason why is you want to read every single line, highlight what you disagree with. I do this thing where I highlight and I put a sticky note and I write my notes onto the highlighted area, and then I have it tabbed out, right? And so you just write what you have questions about and write the questions out so you don't forget. And you just go, okay, on page 1, I have a question about who's this person? Because sometimes there's people on there that you're like, I don't know who that is and what's their purpose. All the way to, what this accommodation looks like, or they need to add this accommodation or remove this accommodation. So making sure the spellings are right of the names, things like that. I've had because a lot of times you'll notice that IEPs are copied and pasted. So when I start looking at them a lot, you can see copy and paste, a lot of lazy work. So when my son's name is X and they put Y for the name, and you're like, who is this person? Oh, I just copied and pasted that section. I'm like, yeah, that's not okay. This doesn't obviously fit his need.
Every
and so
time.
it is amazing to me, like, how many times it's copied and pasted. Now, some kids do need the same stuff, sure, but it should be the IEP stands for Individual Education Plan. Therefore, it should be about my individual, not about someone else's individual.
100%. The other thing that you just said, and it reminded me of, so usually when I go to those meetings, like I'm going on lunch because I work full time too. And so I'm like rushing there to do it, whatever. So reading prior is super huge and having those notes. But another thing that I've noticed is sometimes I don't always remember at that meeting additional things to add, like, hey, my kid needs this, or I know my kid needs this. And so I got in the habit of, when we're at home, just regular things. Like, so my oldest struggles with lists. If they're very long, she's not going to remember. You'll tell her 5 things and she will maybe get through the first thing, but it's because I gave her too many things. So that's just something, as a parent, but when I get to those meetings, if I don't have it written down somewhere, so I've gotten in the habit of just things at home, work, life, chores, life. I'll just write little things down, notes in a notebook for her, so then I can take it to my meeting too. So that's been very helpful, in addition to reading and just preparing before you go there.
Yeah, I call it a medical journal, but it's also for education. So I just get a journal, and I have, each kid has a different color all the time, as long as I can find them. And so if I notice something medically, I write it down and I put a triangle by it because it's medical, and I put a square by it and I highlight them if it's about education. So if I notice something at home that I'm noticing, that whether it's during homework or whatever, and so then right before the meeting, I go through and before the IEP even is written out, hey, these are some things I've noticed over the last 6 months. So here's what I would recommend we do. And I do that just because I have to do that. I mean, I do it with our medical stuff too. I send an email because what I call it a stage fright. You get in that meeting and there's so much in your head, and you're on your lunch break, or they scheduled a whole 45 minutes for you, and it's going to take an hour and a half. And you go in there and you're just like, yeah, everything's fine. I don't hurt anywhere right now. And as soon as they walk out the door, you're like, oh my God, my back hurts, my hip hurts. It's similar to that, to the IEP. You go in there and you have stage fright. You're like, yeah, okay, that looks good. That looks good. That looks good. Now, but keep that in mind, keeping in mind that an IEP is a continually flowing document. You can change and amend it every week if you need to. So remember that you can always change IEP. It is not set in stone. It is made in pencil so that you can make changes. So that's something that is very important to know. So if you do forget something, don't beat yourself up. Just say, hey, send an email out to the team. And once you start getting a team together, if you have a Google, you can set up a team. I'm like, Team Ryland 2020. And this is what it has in there. It has all the teachers. So when I just hit Ryland's name and I put it in there, and it's just has all the and all the teachers just kind of auto populate into the email, so that I can just email. I don't forget anybody, and so everybody's in there at all times. And that way, so when you do it, you have see, I'm dyslexic and I'm very disorganized, so I have to try ways to find myself to organize myself. But I'll send an email out asking questions and support that way, and that's really been helpful. But I mean, sometimes I'll see something at home that needs a change immediately, and I'll send an email saying, hey, I think we need to do this accommodation for Rylan, or we need to do this accommodation for whatever's happening. So
you would never know that you're disorganized. Like, you're
Right.
everything that you've explained is amazing. So you've definitely coped.
So I want to tell you, I'm ADHD and dyslexic, and I have Marfan syndrome like my boys do. So we have so many things going on, and I do property management. So my brain is always going 1,000 miles an hour. And I'm just like, so I have to write everything down. Have to.
Well, I mean, I'm fascinated, just like Cheri probably is too. I mean, what wonderful tips. And it sounds to me like organization, documentation, research, and review is just really super important in this whole thing.
And kind of setting your expectations for really, you have to set your expectations for, this is going to be the long haul, and you're not going to stop fighting, and you're going to have to fight every beginning of every school year, the middle of every school year, and all the way through the very beginning, all the way through. So just, it doesn't end. And I mean, you'll fight in college too. I have a twin sister, and her daughter is dyslexic, and my twin sister does not have dyslexia, so she was able to help her daughter really easily, where I'm like going, I have dyslexia. How can I teach my kid when I can't do it myself? So she was able to help her daughter without the support of the school district. And then when she went to college, she got her first independent education evaluation in her sophomore year of college because she needed support. So that tells you that kids are not getting supported like they're supposed to. They're not getting recognized and identified. So.
Totally.
Can I ask one more thing, Steph?
Yeah.
When I was going through my daughter's IEP process really early, like the very first time, my friend was actually her teacher at the time, and I love her. And I think that that's why, well, we became friends during that process, but I think that that's really what helped move things through so smoothly. Because she would text me and say, hey, doing this today or whatever. So I was able to learn a lot more inside the classroom when I'm not there, which was super helpful. But she told me, never let this IEP go. And so can we talk about that? Because you said, and so they've tried numerous times, multiple schools. Okay, well, she's gotten to this percentage. Let's go ahead and get her off. And I said, no, because she told me that. But let's talk about why. Because I am a university counselor, so I work at the college level. And so I think it's easy. Our school makes it easy for college students, but I've seen opposite. And so let's just talk about why it's important to keep it forever. Okay.
So IEPs are really important to keep forever because it's hard to get it again. Once you get it, make sure that you are the manager of that IEP. And so once you get the IEP, you will struggle to get it again because you already got off of it once. Why do you need to have it now? Well, this child is doing this. They're fine. And once they've gotten the IEP, so I've actually had a parent come to me and they kicked them off the IEP like 6 months before school started last year. They're back on the IEP now. And the reason why is because they were just basically pushing this kid through because it was just so much extra work. And let me just let you know, this kid was misdiagnosed. Yes, that kid was able to master this because that kid has a high IQ. Never did they do an IQ test on this kid. When they finally did an IQ test on this kid, they're like, oh my gosh, this kid has 160 IQ, but he also has a learning disability in reading. So they didn't realize the two. So what happens is a lot of times they'll try to kick him off. They try to do that to my son as well, my older son, because he didn't test. This is another thing I forgot to tell you guys. His test doesn't say that he needs an IEP. Okay, so if his test doesn't say he needs an IEP, doesn't mean that he doesn't need an IEP. Show me his samples of his work. Because my kid tests like a rock star. Like he went through tests this summer and was amazing at doing all the testing. And he just tested right out of all the classroom and he got all his extra credit through because he missed most of last year or the year before because of his attempted suicide. So we had to make up some credits. And so when he tested like a rock star, but I'm gonna tell you, he couldn't write a paragraph to save his life. And so and I said, show me proof that he can be out of the class and we'll talk about it. Show me a written example of what he's doing. And he's not in the room. So you just, this is just me and the teachers. And they couldn't produce that. So it was like, then why would you take him off the IEP if he is not producing that? And that's when I demanded an IEE for him at that point. Because they said, no, he doesn't have dyslexia because he didn't have an actual diagnosis. So mind you, he's an 8th grader at the time getting an IEE. So 8th grade getting an IEE because they misidentified his needs. We knew he was smart because the kid, what 14-year-old do you know that stays up till 4 a.m. watching documentaries? I don't know any except for mine.
Well, and just because they have a learning disability or a challenge doesn't mean that they're not smart children.
Exactly.
Like that's the misconception. And the other thing that I think is certain diagnosis, ASD for one, there is what's called masking. So they can make everyone think that they're fine and that there's no issues to the outside stereotypical, whatever they think that might look like, but that's not okay.
Yeah, I've had so many teachers tell me, "Are you sure he's on the spectrum?" 100%, 100% sure. Yeah, and so and here's the question that people always ask: when do I involve my student in the IEP process? As soon as they want to, but I would say that as soon as junior high hits, is when they want to be a part of it. And the reason why is because this is when they're going to start learning to advocate for themselves in the classroom, and they have to learn to advocate for themselves and being part of the IEP process. And I always start every meeting with, okay, let's talk about what's great about this student. Let's talk about his great attributes. Let's go around the table each, because you got, at that point, you got 6 teachers, right? 7 teachers. Let's talk about what's great about the student. And then I don't say, what are the problems? I say, what areas do you think we can improve on? And I run the meeting in that way. Because I don't want it to be like, because it is tearing down a kid if they go in those meetings sometimes. And so just saying, this is the areas we could work on, but this is, oh my gosh, this is so great. And there are some teachers that I've had to say, I'm sorry, let's make this a positive conversation. Do you need to take a deep breath, walk out, come back in? That's fine. Go ahead and do it. I've been that parent that has said to teachers that I've actually said in IEP, one of the last IEP meetings I went to with my son, let's all take a deep breath, maybe meditate for a little bit, and let's restart with a positive attitude, because it is very negative, and teachers and administrators feel like you're being attacked because they are. I mean, essentially they are being told they're not doing their job right, which means, okay, so does that mean my education doesn't work, or does that mean I don't have enough education? So they are being, told they're not doing something right. So it is hard to hear that.
Yeah, but I think that you've said it a couple times. Certain people definitely don't need to be in this role or within that environment of teaching and helping a child grow. You have to have a passion to be a teacher, honestly. And if you don't, then you're in the wrong career. Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing is respect the teacher as much as you respect yourself, because we are fighting. And I always preference, like at today's meetings, I said, understand that my anger is not based not towards you, it's towards the system and how broken it is. And I want you to understand that my frustration is not at you as well. It's just about what is going on. And I'm not trying to be a pain in the butt, but here's what's going on. And I always try to preface all my conversations and emails like this. I know that this is a problem. A reminder: I'm not mad at you guys. What I am is frustrated that this is not happening the right way. And sometimes it's just human error. Sometimes it's just human error, and we have to be forgiving, because you have those teachers in your kid's life the next 12 years. No matter what, you have teachers in your life. And if you're in a small town or a big town, whatever district you're in, you don't want to hear, oh my gosh, it's that parent, she is so mean. You don't want, they're shut down as soon as you walk in the meeting. They will talk so elementary school teachers talk to middle school teachers, and middle school teachers talk to high school teachers, and some of the elementary teachers talk to the high school teachers as well. So just be prepared to show grace, but also be firm with your expectations.
I think that's huge. And really, like with doing anything in life, often the person that you're dealing with isn't necessarily the one that's made all the decisions or done all the things. So if you come at them a little sideways, then of course, naturally as humans, we get a bit defensive. We don't necessarily want to be as helpful as maybe we would have 5 minutes before you came sideways at me. You know what I mean? So I think that that's a huge, huge, big thing. And I've taken a lot from this conversation today, but that's a big part of it. I feel like being able to keep your cool so that you can properly advocate and can get people to help you better throughout, your travels in this situation.
I have said many times, it is okay to cry. And I will tell you that I have also said, do not take my tears for weakness. My tears are because I'm so angry or I'm so sad that you guys cannot see what I'm seeing. And I've said those things because especially when there's, I hate to say it this way, but especially when there's men in the positions of authority, I have seen little smirks and smiles on their face when a parent has cried. And I swear to you, I've had comments about it. Do not take this for weakness. These parents are crying because you're not doing what you're supposed to. And this is very personal. It is a very personal thing. And you know what? Whoever you are dealing with an IEP right now, pat yourself on the back, because you're a freaking rock star. This is hard work. The professionals do this. What I've been advocating with people, I've met people that do it for $500 an hour. I am not doing that. $500 an hour, which means your time is worth $500 an hour right now because you're advocating for your child. Right. So you need to know that you are doing your best. And if you have a question, it's never wrong to ask or change what's happening. It's never wrong.
You're amazing. Thank you so much for being on with us. Thank you so much for all of your inspiration and just really, I think just this episode is supportive for parents out there in and of itself that are going through this. So thank you both. And, Cheri, I know that you have lots of experience and knowledge to bring to the table too. So Steph, you mentioned that you are a single parent.
Yes, for 12 years now.
You're going to love this. Have you heard anything about our MOMnation project?
No.
Okay, so real quick, and before we go, because I'm sure you probably have to go, you poor thing, you've been sitting in your car for an hour. Okay. So the MOMnation project is, it's our next big thing. It's our baby. It's what we've been cooking up. All three of us, Jenny, Cheri, and I, that run MOMnation. There's lots of awesome individuals that help run MOMnation, but the three of us have all been affected by single motherhood. I was raised by one. They both were single mothers at one point in their lives. And we all realized that there's just a lack of help and resources, speaking of help and resources, for people transitioning into becoming single moms. And, you know, I'm sure for single dads too, but we're just going to be focusing on the moms here. So we're creating a resource, and it's even going to have housing, housing abilities or my mind went blank there for a second, but resources for housing is what I want to say. Mental health, even an advocate such as yourself, something like this I think is really important to be a resource within this package, within this whole project. And so we're looking for as many ears and eyes on this show as possible so that we can gain awareness for this project. The wheels have already begun turning. We're already starting to put together these resources. Eventually would love to offer them for free to moms to be able to tap into.
I will tell you, as a single mom, I have been homeless. I have stood in food bank lines with my children. I have volunteered at food banks after I received the food with my children, and there's been so many housing issues. And I do property management now, and I see parents that struggle keeping housing because it is so expensive to live. I don't know how it is in Arizona, but California and here, I'm sure it is just terrible. And just finding resources. I mean, having that kind of resource is invaluable.
Thank you. And we're really passionate about creating this. And I mean, many resources, like from mental health to substance abuse, to creating a resume, to, you know, this kind of stuff, to dealing with, you know, IEPs and different plans and with special education. And I mean, just everything, childcare help. It's going to be amazing. So, that is what we're looking to do right now as we start to build this resource. Is we're just looking for as many eyes and ears on this show as possible. So we'd love everybody to please go to your absolute favorite platform. We appreciate iTunes. I don't know why. Beth tells me why, but I forget every single time. We love iTunes. So please go to iTunes, rate, subscribe, follow, download the episodes. We don't get credit for the episodes through iTunes unless you actually download them. So do a sister a favor over here and do that. And we are that much further to our MOMmunes. So thank you so much, Steph and Cheri. It was lovely seeing you both today.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thank you, Steph. Bye.
Bye.